The dark, oppressive chamber dripped with condensation, each droplet striking the metal floor with a rhythmic ping that had become Princess Azora's only companion over the past 7 days. Her azure skin, once radiant with the bioluminescent patterns unique to the Aquilonian royal bloodline, had faded to a dull gray blue. Energy shackles suspended her 3 feet above the ground, arms outstretched in a cruel mockery of flight, the anti-gravity restraints ensuring she could find no respite in unconsciousness. Aquilon, the last water world of the Galactic Alliance, had fallen to the Hegemon Empire 8 standard cycles ago. The once proud oceanic civilization, known throughout the galaxy for their advanced hydrotechnology and peaceful diplomatic endeavors, had been reduced to another conquered territory in the Hegemon's relentless expansion. But the Empire had a problem: they couldn't access Aquilon's most valuable defense systems without the royal protection codes. And those codes resided in only one place: Princess Azora's mind. The Hegemon docking station orbited the gas giant Pyraxis, far from prying eyes and potential Alliance rescue attempts. It was a retrofitted asteroid hollowed out and transformed into a military hub with shipbuilding capabilities. Its interior was a labyrinth of cold steel corridors, dim lighting, and the ever-present hum of machinery, a perfect prison for an aquatic princess accustomed to the open seas of her homeworld. The door to Azora's torture chamber slid open, bathing the room in harsh white light that made her wince despite her determination to show no weakness. Commander Draith entered, his cybernetic eye glowing an unnatural crimson against his pallid face. Behind him floated a neural disruptor, a spherical device covered in sensors and needle-like probes that Azora had become intimately familiar with over her captivity. "Your resilience is impressive, Your Highness Draith," said, his voice artificially modulated to a tone designed to instill fear. "But ultimately futile. The protection codes are merely data. Data can be extracted." Azora lifted her head, her once regal features gaunt but defiant. Her voice, though cracked from screaming, remained steady. "My people's freedom is worth more than my comfort, Draith. You've learned nothing in 7 days. You'll learn nothing in 7 years." Draith sighed, the sound distorted through his respirator. "Today, we'll try something different." He gestured, and the neural disruptor advanced, its probes extending toward Azora's temples. "This setting bypasses your conscious resistance. It may permanently damage your cognitive functions, but it will give us what we need." Azora closed her eyes, steeling herself for a pain beyond anything she'd experienced. The Aquilonian royal family had undergone mental conditioning against interrogation, but this would test the limits of her training. As the first probe touched her skin, sending electric fire through her nerves, she retreated to her mental sanctuary, the deep-sea gardens of her childhood, where light filtered through crystal waters in patterns of blue and green. The explosion came without warning. The chamber door blasted inward with such force that it pinned one of Draith's guards to the opposite wall. Through the smoke and debris stepped a figure in a battered flight suit, adorned with scorch marks and makeshift repairs. His exposed forearms showed the pink skin of a human, and a shock of unkempt auburn hair fell across his face as he raised a modified plasma rifle. 3 plasma bolts cut diagonally through the room, striking the neural disruptor, and 2 guards with precision that spoke of military training. The disruptor exploded in a shower of sparks that rained down on Draith, who had dropped to a defensive crouch, his personal shield activating with a shimmer of blue energy. "Ah, 7 hells, they really did a number on you, Princess." The human's voice carried a lilt of an outer colony accent, casual despite the circumstances. "Name's Mads Rowan. Friends call me Rogue. Let's get you out of these fancy bracelets." Draith snarled, drawing his sidearm. "Kill him!" The remaining guards raised their weapons, but Mads was already in motion. He rolled beneath their fire, came up behind a console, and lobbed something small and cylindrical toward them. The flashbang detonated with a concussive wave that disoriented everyone, except Mads, who had dropped a protective visor over his eyes at the last second. With 3 more precise shots, the guards collapsed. Draith, however, had retreated through a secondary door, his shield absorbing 2 plasma bolts that Mads fired at his retreating form. Coward, Mads muttered, then turned his attention to Azora. He approached the control panel for her restraints, his fingers dancing over the interface. Alliance intelligence said you were being held, but they didn't mention the 5-star accommodations. The energy shackles deactivated suddenly, and Azora collapsed. Mads lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Up close, she could see the fatigue in his hazel eyes, the stubble on his jaw, and the faint scars that crossed his knuckles, a man who lived by his wits and his skill. "Why?" she managed to ask, her voice barely audible. Mads grinned the expression, transforming his rugged features into something almost boyish. "The Alliance needs you, Princess, and I've never been good at following hegemon rules." He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight. "Can you walk? Because running would be better. We've got about 3 minutes before this place is swarming with troops." As if on cue, alarms began to blare, the chamber's dim lighting, shifting to pulsating red. Azora forced strength into her legs, drawing on reserves she didn't know she had. "I can run," she said, though her body screamed in protest. "Do you have an extraction plan, or did you just come to die with me?" Mads handed her a compact blaster. "Option 1 sounds more fun. I've got a ship docked in Maintenance Bay 4. It's not far." "You docked at a hegemon station?" Azora asked incredulously. "Borrowed their codes. They'll figure it out soon enough." He checked the corridor outside. "Clear for now. Stay close." They moved into the hallway, Azora fighting dizziness with each step. The red alert lighting made the metal corridor appear as if it were bleeding. In the distance, they could hear the synchronized footfalls of hegemon security squads, mobilizing. Mads led them down a series of turns, his movements indicating familiarity with the station layout. When they encountered a patrol of 3 guards, he dispatched them with efficient brutality, a plasma shot for one, a combat knife to the throat of the second, and a bone-breaking tackle for the third. "Alliance intelligence has the station schematics," he explained, as they moved on, retrieving his knife and wiping it on his sleeve. "There's a maintenance shaft ahead that'll get us closer to the bay." They reached an access panel, which Mads quickly removed. Inside was a narrow shaft barely wide enough for his shoulders. "Ladies first," he said with a wink that seemed entirely inappropriate for their situation. Azora gave him a withering look before hauling herself into the shaft. The metal was cold against her abused body, but the pain helped focus her mind. Behind her, Mads replaced the panel after squeezing through. The shaft angled downward, leading them through the bowels of the station. Occasionally, they would pause as security teams passed beneath them, their voices muffled through the metal. "So," Mads whispered during one such pause, "what's so special about these protection codes that they'd risk diplomatic incident to torture a princess?" Azora glanced back at him. "The codes don't just control our defense systems. They're the key to our aqua fusion technology. Hegemon wants it for their warships' unlimited power drawn from water. With it, they could double their fleet's range." Mads whistled softly. "And they'd drain Aquilon dry in the process. No wonder you didn't break." After 20 minutes of crawling through increasingly narrow passages, they reached another access panel. Mads checked a small device on his wrist. "Maintenance bay should be just through here. My ship's docked at the external port." He hesitated. "It might get messy out there." Azora raised her blaster. "I'm the daughter of Admiral Tethys. I know how to fight." "Never doubted it for a second, Your Highness." Mads kicked the panel out and dropped into a dimly lit maintenance bay. Azora followed, landing with more grace than her weakened state should have allowed. The bay was filled with repair drones and partially disassembled ship components, offering plenty of cover. Across the room, through a large viewport, Azora could see a sleek, matte black ship docked at an external port. Its design was unfamiliar, neither hegemon nor Alliance standard issue. "That's the Phantom," Mads said, pride evident in his voice. "Modified Sunthorn-class scout. She doesn't look like much, but she's got it where it counts." They moved cautiously through the bay, using the equipment as cover. They were halfway to the airlock when a security detail burst through the main doors, weapons raised. "Down!" Mads shouted, pulling Azora behind a generator as plasma fire scorched the air above them. Azora didn't hesitate. She rolled to the side and fired 3 precise shots, dropping 2 Hegemon soldiers. Mads gave her an appreciative glance before returning fire. "The airlock controls are behind them," he said, between volleys. "We need to clear a path." Azora spotted a cluster of fuel cells near the Hegemon position. She pointed them out to Mads, who grinned in understanding. They fired simultaneously, their combined shots detonating the cells with a thunderous explosion that sent the remaining guards flying. They sprinted for the airlock, diving through as more security forces appeared at the far end of the bay. Mads slammed his hand on the control panel, sealing the door behind them, just as plasma bolts began to impact it. "They'll override that in seconds," Azora warned. "Won't matter." Mads led her to his ship, pressing his palm against its hull. A concealed hatch opened in response to his biometric signature. "In you go." The interior of the Phantom was surprisingly spacious, with a cockpit designed for a single pilot and a small cabin area behind. Everything was meticulously maintained despite the ship's battle-worn exterior. Mads slid into the pilot's seat with practiced ease, his fingers flying over the controls. The ship hummed to life around them, systems engaging in a sequence that spoke of countless quick escapes. "Strap in," he said, tossing her a medkit from beneath his seat. "Take care of those wounds. This might get bumpy." Azora secured herself in the co-pilot's chair, applying Medigel to the worst of her injuries, as Mads disengaged from the docking clamps. "They've locked us down," he muttered, reading the alert on his console. "Typical Hegemon hospitality." He flipped a series of switches overhead. "Fortunately, I brought a skeleton key." A surge of power ran through the ship, and the docking clamps suddenly released alarms blaring throughout the station. The Phantom pulled away, just as the airlock door behind them was breached, Hegemon soldiers pouring through, only to find their quarry beyond reach. "They'll deploy fighters," Azora warned, becoming more alert as the Medigel took effect. "Counting on it." Mads accelerated away from the station, the Phantom's engines pushing them back into their seats. "There's an asteroid field nearby. Perfect place to even the odds." Sure enough, the station's alert system announced the launch of pursuit craft. 6 Hegemon interceptors, arrow-shaped and bristling with weapons, emerged from launch bays and formed up to pursue. Mads piloted with a confidence that bordered on recklessness, pushing the Phantom toward the asteroid field that surrounded Paraxis. The gas giant loomed in the viewport, its swirling storms a backdrop to the deadly game of cat and mouse. The first interceptor closed within firing range, its forward cannons spitting green energy bolts that the Phantom barely evaded. Mads executed a tight roll between 2 asteroids, using their mass to shield against the barrage. "I hate to criticize my rescuer," Azora said, gripping her seat as the ship shuddered under near misses, "but we're outnumbered and outgunned." "Numbers and guns aren't everything, Princess." Mads flashed her that disarming grin again. "Watch and learn." He cut the main engines suddenly, allowing momentum to carry them forward, while the interceptors overshot. In that moment of positional advantage, Mads fired the Phantom's concealed rear cannons, destroying one pursuer and damaging another. But the respite was brief. The remaining interceptors adjusted their approach, executing a pincer maneuver that would trap the Phantom between crossfires. "Hold tight," Mads warned. He activated a secondary system that Azora didn't recognize, and the Phantom suddenly accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible for a vessel its size. They shot deeper into the asteroid field, where the larger rocks formed a natural maze. The Hegemon pilots were skilled, but their ships lacked the Phantom's maneuverability. One interceptor collided with an asteroid after a particularly sharp turn, exploding in a brief flare of light. Another took damage from debris, its engines sputtering as it fell behind. 3 left. Mads muttered, his focus absolute, as he threaded the Phantom through increasingly narrow gaps between asteroids. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his hands remained steady on the controls. Azora watched him with growing respect. This wasn't just skill, it was artistry. "Where did you learn to fly like this?" "Alliance Starfighter Corps originally," he replied, executing a vertical slip between two colliding asteroids that left another interceptor in pieces. "Before I decided independent contracting paid better." "You're a mercenary." Azora couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. Mads glanced at her. "Prefer the term freelance problem solver. And today's problem is getting you to safety." The last two interceptors were closing again, their weapons finding range despite the obstacle course of the asteroid field. The Phantom shuddered as a glancing hit struck its port side. "Shields at 60%, Mads reported. "Time to stop playing nice." He reversed thrust, suddenly spinning the Phantom in place to face their pursuers. Before they could react to the unexpected maneuver, he fired a spread of micro-torpedoes that detonated in a chain reaction, creating a wall of expanding debris directly in the interceptor's path. One pilot managed to evade, but the other flew directly into the debris cloud. Their shields failed under the onslaught, and secondary explosions tore the interceptor apart. "Last one's breaking off," Azora observed, watching the surviving craft turn away. "Not running," Mads corrected. "Calling for reinforcements. We need to make the jump to light speed before they bring in something bigger." He plotted a course on the navigation system. "There's a neutral trading post in the Verlaine system. We can resupply there and make contact with Alliance assets." The Phantom broke free of the asteroid field, accelerating to jump velocity. Behind them, the sensors detected larger vessels launching from the Hegemon station. "Cutting it close," Azora murmured. "Story of my life, princess." Mads engaged the lightspeed drive, and the stars stretched into radiant lines around them as they escaped into the safety of hyperspace. Once they were secure in lightspeed transit, Azora allowed herself to relax slightly. Her body ached from the ordeal of captivity, and the adrenaline of escape was wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Mads set the autopilot and turned to her, his expression softening. "You should get some rest. There's a medical berth in the back with better supplies than that basic kit." Azora nodded, too tired to maintain royal dignity. "How long until we reach this trading post?" "About 6 hours." He hesitated. "I'm sorry I couldn't get to you sooner. We didn't know they'd moved you to that station until 3 days ago." "You came. That's what matters." She stood carefully, her legs unsteady. "Why did you, though? Really, the Alliance abandoned Aquilon months ago." Mads ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Not everyone in the Alliance agrees with the official stance. There's a resistance forming, people who believe the Hegemon need to be stopped before they consume every independent world in the galaxy." He paused. "And maybe I've got a personal stake in seeing them fall." Before Azora could ask what he meant, exhaustion overtook her. Mads caught her as she swayed, supporting her weight effortlessly. "Questions later," he said gently. "Healing now." He helped her to the medical berth, a compact but well-equipped alcove with auto-diagnostic capabilities. As she lay down, the berth systems activated, scanning her injuries and administering appropriate treatments through painless dermis-penetrating therapy. "Thank you," she whispered as consciousness began to fade. The last thing she saw was Mads's smile, not the cocky grin he wore in danger, but something softer and more genuine. "Rest well, princess. The fight's just beginning." When Azora awoke, the Phantom was docking at Verlaine Station, a sprawling structure of interconnected habitation rings and commercial hubs that operated independently from any major galactic power. Its neutrality was protected by an extensive defense grid and the financial interests of dozens of trading corporations that valued its status as open territory. Mads helped her from the medical berth, and she was pleased to discover that most of her pain had subsided. The worst of her physical injuries had healed, though the psychological trauma of prolonged torture would take longer to overcome. "We need to change your appearance," Mads explained, as they prepared to disembark. "Hegemon will have your biosignature flagged at every checkpoint in the sector." From a storage compartment, he produced civilian clothing, simple but well-made garments in muted colors that would help them blend in with the station's diverse population. More significantly, he offered her a small device that resembled a dermal patch. Biosignature modulator, he explained. Military grade. It'll alter your cellular emissions enough to fool standard scanners. Won't hold up to a medical examination, but it'll get you through security checkpoints. Azora took the device impressed despite herself. This is restricted technology. Alliance intelligence doesn't give these to just anyone. Mads shrugged. Let's just say I have friends in useful places. He affixed his own modulator to his neck, and his features subtly shifted, not enough to make him unrecognizable, but sufficient to confuse facial recognition systems. Azora applied hers, feeling a tingling sensation as it took effect. Her distinctive blue skin tone muted to a more common cyan shade, and the royal bioluminescent patterns that marked her heritage faded completely. Perfect, Mads said, appraising her. Now you look like any other Aquilonian trader. I'll be your human business partner. Stay close. Let me do the talking and we'll be fine. They disembarked into Verlaine Station's bustling docking bay, where ships of dozens of designs from across the galaxy were moored. The air carried the mingled scents of various atmospheres' foods and the distinctive ozone tang of spacecraft engines. Beings of every description moved about their business, creating a cacophony of languages and movement. Mads guided Azora through the crowd with a hand lightly touching her lower back, his posture casual, but his eyes constantly scanning for threats. They passed a hegemon security checkpoint with ease, the guards barely glancing at their falsified credentials before waving them through. "Where are we going?" Azora asked quietly, once they were clear. "To meet a friend," Mads replied. "Someone who can help us get you safely to the Alliance Resistance headquarters." They made their way to the station's commercial district, a labyrinth of shops, eateries, and entertainment venues designed to separate travelers from their credits. Mads led her to a small establishment tucked between a parts supplier and a nutrient bar. The sign above the door displayed Stellar Communications in multiple languages. Inside the shop was cluttered with communication devices from across the galaxy, some so outdated they belonged in a museum, others cutting-edge prototypes not yet available to the public. Behind a counter strewn with components sat a lean, dark-skinned human with silver-streaked hair cropped close to his scalp. The man looked up as they entered, his expression carefully neutral, until recognition flickered in his eyes. "Customers, welcome to Stellar Communications. How may I assist you today?" Mads approached the counter. "Looking for something with extended range, something that can reach old friends even in difficult times." It was clearly a code phrase. The man's demeanor shifted subtly, and he pressed a concealed button beneath the counter. The shop's windows darkened, and a faint hum indicated the activation of privacy fields. "Mads Rowan," the man said, his formal tone dissolving into familiarity. Still alive against all odds. His gaze shifted to Azora, showing no sign of recognition despite her royal status. "And with company." "Cyrus," Mads greeted him. "This is—" "No names," Cyrus interrupted. "Not even here." He gestured toward a door behind the counter. "Come through. We can talk safely in the back." The back room was a stark contrast to the cluttered shop, clinically organized with multiple displays, showing security feeds of the surrounding area. Cyrus sealed the door and activated additional security measures before turning to face them. "You can remove the modulators now," he said. "This room is shielded." Azora deactivated her disguise, her natural appearance restoring itself. Cyrus bowed deeply as recognition dawned. "Your Highness, it is an honor I never expected." "Your Alliance intelligence," Azora stated, rather than asked. "Retired," Cyrus corrected. "Officially, at least. Now I'm just a humble shopkeeper who occasionally helps old colleagues." He turned to Mads. "You actually did it. Extracted her from a hegemon black site. The odds were—" "Never tell me the odds," Mads interrupted with a grin. "You know it just encourages me." Cyrus shook his head, but there was fondness in the gesture. "What do you need from me?" Transportation to Alliance Resistance Headquarters intel on Hegemon fleet movements, and whatever you've got on a Commander Drath. Mads leaned against a console. He's the one who was supervising the princess's interrogation. Cyrus moved to a terminal, his fingers flying over the interface. Drath, cybernetically enhanced after injuries sustained in the Battle of Corvus Belt. Rapid promotion through Hegemon ranks. Current assignment. He paused, his expression darkening. He's been transferred to the Dominion. The Dominion? Azora asked, noting how both men tensed at the name. Hegemon flagship, Mads explained. Most heavily armed vessel in their fleet. Where is it now? Cyrus pulled up navigational data. Heading to the Aquilon system. Apparently your escape has accelerated their timeline. They're planning a full occupation of your homeworld princess. Without the protection codes, they'll use brute force to access your technology. Azora's fists clenched. My people will resist, but against the Dominion. She didn't need to finish the thought. The flagship's firepower could reduce Aquilon's floating cities to rubble within hours. We need to warn the resistance, Mads said. And we need a plan to stop that ship. Cyrus nodded grimly. I can get you to the resistance base, but stopping the Dominion, that would require infiltrating the most secure Hegemon vessel in existence, somehow sabotaging its systems, and escaping alive. He looked between them. It would be suicide. Not if we have the right intel and equipment, Mads countered. He turned to Azora. Princess, I got you out. My mission was to deliver you safely to the resistance. What happens next is your choice. Azora straightened royal determination, returning to her bearing, despite her civilian clothes. My people are in danger. If there's any chance to save them, I must take it. Mads nodded, as if he'd expected no other answer. Then we go after the Dominion. Cyrus sighed heavily. I knew you'd say that. He returned to his terminal. Give me an hour to compile everything we have on the flagship's security systems and crew rotations. If you're really going to attempt this madness, you'll need every advantage I can give you. While Cyrus worked, he provided them with refreshments and a secure room to rest. Azora used the opportunity to properly clean herself and change into more suitable attire, still civilian, but better fitted and reinforced with subtle protective elements. When she emerged, she found Mads studying schematics of what she assumed was the Dominion. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment his carefully maintained bravado slipped, revealing genuine concern. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. We could get you to safety. Find another way to help your people. Azora sat beside him. Why are you really involved in this, Mads? You mentioned a personal stake. He was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing a scar on his wrist. I had a sister. She was a xenobotanist studying indigenous plant life on Daros IV when the Hegemon arrived. They considered the research facility a strategic location and took it by force. His voice hardened. Civilians were supposed to be evacuated. She never made it out. I'm sorry, Azora said softly. Mads shook his head. The Alliance called it unfortunate collateral damage and did nothing. That's when I knew the official response to Hegemon aggression was never going to be enough. He looked at her directly. So, no, Princess, this isn't just about you or even just about Aquilon. It's about stopping the Hegemon before they destroy everything that matters. Their moment of connection was interrupted when Cyrus returned, carrying datapads and what appeared to be Hegemon military uniforms. I've got what you need, he announced. Transport arranged to rendezvous with the Resistance fleet in 6 hours. But first, you should see this. He activated a holographic display, showing recent news broadcasts. The images showed Hegemon officials announcing the escape of a dangerous Aquilonian terrorist, Azora, though they didn't use her royal title, and offering substantial rewards for information leading to her capture. More disturbingly, they claimed the Alliance was harboring her and using the situation to justify military action against Hegemon interests. They're creating a pretext for expanded aggression, Cyrus explained. using your escape to justify attacks on Alliance worlds that have shown sympathy to Aquilon. Azora watched the propaganda with growing anger. All the more reason to stop them at the source. Cyrus nodded grimly. About that, I have a plan. He laid out the data pads. The Dominion will be at Aquilon in 3 days. You can intercept it at the Carillon waypoint, where it will stop to integrate additional forces. I've acquired Hegemon supply ship credentials and uniforms. With the right approach, you could board as logistics personnel. And once aboard, Mads asked, I've identified a vulnerability in their automated command systems, Cyrus said, displaying complex code sequences. A virus delivered to the right terminal could temporarily disable their targeting systems and communications. It won't stop the ship, but it would create enough chaos for the Resistance fleet to launch a surprise attack. That's assuming the Resistance has enough firepower to challenge the Dominion, Azora pointed out. Cyrus smiled thinly. Admiral Korik has been quietly gathering ships for months. The Alliance officially disbanded its military response to the Hegemon, but many captains and crews disagreed. They formed a substantial force, not enough to win an extended war, but perhaps enough to cripple the flagship and turn the tide. Mads studied the plan. Getting aboard is the easy part, delivering the virus and getting out alive. That's where it gets interesting. I never said it was a good plan, Cyrus admitted. Just that it's the only one we have. The next 6 hours were spent in intensive preparation. Cyrus provided them with detailed briefings on Hegemon protocols, the Dominion's layout, and the behavior expected of logistics personnel. They memorized access codes, practiced speaking with the clipped Hegemon accent, and studied the virus delivery procedure until it became second nature. When it was time to leave, Cyrus escorted them to a private docking bay where a nondescript transport waited. This will take you to the rendezvous point. The Resistance fleet is hiding in the Trask Nebula. The radiation interferes with Hegemon long-range scanners. He handed Mads a small case. Advanced weapons communication devices and the virus payload. Try not to get them confiscated before you reach the Dominion. Mads clasped forearms with him in a warrior's farewell. Thanks, old friend. If we don't make it back... Save it, Cyrus interrupted. Just succeed, he turned to Azora. Your Highness, it has been my honor. Your father was a good man and a great admiral. He would be proud of your courage. Azora inclined her head. Thank you for your service, Cyrus. If we succeed, Aquilon will remember its friends. They boarded the transport, watching through the viewport, as Verlaine Station receded behind them. Once they were safely in hyperspace, Mads set the autopilot and joined Azora in the small cabin area. We should rest while we can, he suggested. Once we reach the fleet, it'll be non-stop until the mission. Azora nodded, though rest seemed impossible with the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Do you really think we can succeed? Mads considered the question seriously. I think we have a chance. Sometimes that's all you need. He studied her face. Second thoughts. No, she said firmly. But I am thinking about what comes after. If we succeed, if we cripple the Dominion and drive the Hegemon from Aquilon, what then? The Alliance fractured once. What prevents it from happening again when the next threat appears? That, Mads said with unexpected gravity, will be up to leaders like you. The old Alliance failed because it prioritized commerce over community stability, over justice. Perhaps what rises from its ashes will be stronger. The conversation faded into companionable silence as the transport carried them toward the Resistance fleet and the desperate mission ahead. The Trask Nebula bloomed before them in swirls of amber and violet ionized gases, creating a natural fortress that confounded sensors and protected the ships hidden within. As their transport approached, a squadron of fighters emerged from the colorful haze. Alliance designs, but with identifying marks painted over. A tense communication exchange followed with recognition codes provided by Cyrus, granting them passage. They were escorted deeper into the nebula, where the full Resistance fleet was revealed. Azora gasped at the sight. Dozens of warships of various classes and origins had gathered. Alliance vessels predominated, But there were also ships from independent worlds, mercenary groups, and even a few converted civilian craft. All had rallied to oppose hegemon expansion. At the center of the formation floated the Aurora, an Alliance heavy cruiser that now served as the Resistance flagship. Their transport was directed to its main hangar bay, where a reception committee awaited. Admiral Korik stood at the forefront, a tall, imposing Taurian with the characteristic horned crest of his species. His uniform bore Alliance insignia, though the rank pins had been removed in acknowledgement of his technically renegade status. As Azora descended the transport's ramp, the assembled officers and crew snapped to attention. Korik stepped forward and executed a formal bow. "Princess Azora of Aquilon," he intoned, his deep voice resonating in the hangar. "Your presence honors us. We had feared the worst when news of your capture reached us." "The worst nearly came to pass, Admiral," Azora replied, "if not for Mads Rowan's intervention." Korik turned his attention to Mads, who maintained a respectful but distinctly unmilitary posture. "Rowan, I see your reputation for achieving the impossible remains intact." "Just needed the right motivation, Admiral." Mads nodded toward Azora. "The Princess has information about hegemon plans for Aquilon, and we've brought a proposal for striking at the Dominion itself." Korik's eyes widened slightly, the Taurian equivalent of shocked disbelief. "The Dominion come. We should discuss this in private." They were escorted to the Aurora's Strategic Command Center, where senior resistance leaders had gathered. Azora noted the diversity of species and worlds represented a testament to how widely the hegemon threat had spread. For the next hour, she briefed them on what she had learned during captivity about hegemon's intentions for Aquilon's aqua fusion technology. Then, Mads outlined Cyrus's plan for infiltrating the Dominion at the Carillon waypoint. When they finished, Admiral Korik paced the room, his hooved feet clicking against the deck. "The plan has merit," he admitted. "But the risks are extraordinary. If you're captured, the intelligence you possess would be devastating to our cause." "With respect, Admiral," Azora countered, "inaction guarantees Aquilon's fall. My people cannot withstand a full assault from the Dominion." "And there's a broader strategic opportunity," Mads added. "The Dominion isn't just a warship, it's a symbol. Crippling it would show the galaxy that hegemon isn't invincible. You'd see defections from their ranks, more worlds joining the Resistance." A Vorlian captain with translucent skin that revealed her complex circulatory system spoke up. "The virus would need to be delivered to the Central Command node. Security there will be impenetrable." "Not for logistics personnel with Level 3 clearance," Mads countered, displaying the credentials Cyrus had provided. "During shift rotations, there's a 3-minute window where the corridor to Central Command has minimal supervision." Debate continued, with various officers raising concerns, and Mads or Azora addressing them. Finally, Admiral Korik raised a hand for silence. "The decision is made. We will proceed with the plan." He turned to Azora. "Not because it is safe, Your Highness, but because it may be our only chance to turn the tide. The Resistance fleet will position itself near Carillon, cloaked by the system's radiation belt. If you succeed in disrupting the Dominion systems, we will attack with everything we have." Preparations began immediately. The Aurora's technical specialists enhanced the virus Cyrus had provided, optimizing it for faster deployment. Weapons experts modified the seemingly innocuous tools they would carry as logistics personnel to conceal deadly capabilities. Intelligence officers drilled them on hegemon protocols until their responses became automatic. Through it all, Azora found herself drawing strength from Mads' unwavering confidence. His casual humor masked a steely determination that matched her own royal resolve. They developed a wordless communication, anticipating each other's thoughts and movements in a way that would prove vital during the mission. The night before they were to depart, Azora found Mads alone in the observation lounge, watching the nebula's gases swirl beyond the viewport. She joined him, silently standing close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Thinking about tomorrow?" she asked after a comfortable silence. Thinking about the day after, he replied. If we succeed, if we survive. Having second thoughts, she echoed his earlier question. He smiled, though his eyes remained on the nebula. No, just wondering what a princess and a rebellious ex-pilot do when the mission ends. He glanced at her. You'll return to your throne. Rebuild Aquilon. He shrugged. Find another impossible mission, I suppose. Azora studied his profile, seeing past the cavalier facade to the man beneath a man who had risked everything to save her, who fought not for glory, but for justice. Perhaps, she said carefully, rebuilding an alliance of free worlds would qualify as an impossible mission, one that might require both royal diplomacy and unconventional problem-solving skills. Mads turned to face her, fully surprised and something warmer in his expression. Are you offering me a job, Princess? I'm suggesting a partnership, she clarified. But first, we have to survive tomorrow. Well then, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper as he leaned closer. We definitely have to survive. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities. Then alarms sounded throughout the ship, breaking the spell. All senior officers to command, Admiral Korik's voice announced over the intercom. Hegemon scouts detected on the nebula perimeter. They rushed to the bridge where tactical displays showed 3 Hegemon reconnaissance vessels probing the edges of the nebula. Have they detected us? Azora asked. Uncertain, replied the sensor officer. The nebula is masking our signatures, but if they enter further, they may find us. Admiral Korik made a swift decision. We cannot risk discovery. Launch plan must be accelerated. He turned to Mads and Azora. You need to depart immediately. The supply ship is prepped and ready. Within the hour, they were aboard the small Hegemon supply vessel that would be their cover for infiltrating the Dominion. Its credentials identified it as the Reliant assigned to deliver specialized components to the flagship at Carillon Waypoint. Mads piloted, while Azora monitored communications, both now dressed in the gray-green uniforms of Hegemon logistics officers. The biosignature modulators had been enhanced to withstand closer scrutiny, altering their appearances to match the identification documents they carried. They emerged from the nebula, far from where the scout ships patrolled, then plotted a circuitous course to Carillon that would appear to originate from a Hegemon-controlled sector. The journey would take 14 hours, leaving them alone together in the confined space of the small ship. So, Mads said once they were safely on course, I've been meaning to ask. These protection codes they were torturing you for, what exactly are they? Azora hesitated, then made a decision. They're not just access codes. They're activation sequences for ancient technology beneath Aquilon's oceans. My ancestors discovered artifacts from a civilization that predates all known galactic species. They learned to harness the energy systems, but locked them with biometric keys tied to the royal bloodline. Mads whistled. And the Hegemon want this technology for their ships. They don't understand what they're seeking, Azora said gravely. The energy isn't just powerful. It's sentient in ways we still don't fully comprehend. Used improperly, it could be catastrophic. All the more reason to stop them, Mads concluded. The hours passed with final reviews of the Dominion's layout and security protocols. They memorized their cover identities and rehearsed the plan for reaching the central command node. As the ship's chronometer counted down to their arrival at Carillon, tension mounted. Whatever happens, Mads said as they prepared for the final approach. It's been an honor, Princess. Azora smiled the expression, transforming her face despite the Hegemon disguise. The honor has been mine, Rogue. Carillon Waypoint came into view, a massive space station orbiting a barren planetoid surrounded by Hegemon military vessels. And dwarfing them all was the Dominion, a behemoth of dark metal and weapon arrays that stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Their approach was challenged immediately by Hegemon control. Supply vessel Reliant transmit authorization and manifest, came the terse demand. Mads sent the forged credentials, his expression betraying nothing of the anxiety they both felt. Long seconds passed before the response came. Reliant, you are cleared for docking bay 17. Proceed at 1/4 thrust. Deviate from assigned vector, and you will be destroyed. Acknowledged control, Mads replied in the clipped hegemon manner, proceeding to Bay 17. As they neared the massive flagship, its true scale became apparent. Gun emplacements larger than their entire vessel dotted its hull. Squadrons of fighters patrolled in precise formations. This was the pride of the hegemon fleet, the physical embodiment of their military dominance. They docked without incident, the Reliant's small form engulfed by the cavernous bay. After completing shutdown procedures, they gathered their equipment disguised as standard maintenance tools and prepared to disembark. "Remember," Azora whispered, "we have 45 minutes to reach Central Command during the shift change. Miss that window and security protocols will make it nearly impossible." Mads nodded, checking the concealed blade in his sleeve. "Stay in character. Eyes down when passing officers. Confidence without drawing attention." They stepped onto the Dominion, presenting their documentation to the base security officer, a bored-looking hegemon, who barely glanced at their credentials before waving them through. The interior of the flagship was a marvel of military efficiency. Wide corridors accommodated the rapid movement of troops and equipment. Status displays provided constant updates on ship functions and deployment schedules. Every surface gleamed with the cold perfection of a vessel that represented the height of hegemon technological achievement. They moved purposefully through the ship, Mads occasionally consulting a datapad, as if confirming delivery instructions. When they encountered patrols or officers, they affected the proper submissive demeanor expected of logistics personnel. Following their memorized route, they navigated to a maintenance lift that would take them to the command deck. As they waited for it to arrive, a group of hegemon soldiers approached, led by an officer with distinctive cybernetic enhancements. Azora tensed. It was Commander Draith. Mads sensed her reaction and subtly placed himself between her and the approaching hegemon, bowing his head in deference as protocol demanded. Draith barely glanced at them, engaged in conversation with his subordinates about increased security measures. Then, as he passed, he paused. His cybernetic eye whirred softly as it focused on Azora. "You," he said sharply. "Logistics. What section are you assigned to?" Azora kept her eyes downcast, pitching her voice to a subservient tone. "Section 14, Commander. Delivering specialized components to Central Command as scheduled." The moment stretched painfully as Draith studied her. Had the biosignature modulator failed? Did some remnant of her true appearance show through? "Proceed," he finally said, turning away. "Ensure all deliveries are properly logged. Admiral Vore has ordered increased accountability." "Yes, Commander," Mads replied, and they entered the lift as soon as it arrived. When the doors closed, Azora released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was too close. "But informative," Mads noted. "Admiral Vore is aboard. According to intelligence, he rarely leaves the Central Command node. That complicates things." The lift deposited them on the command deck, where security was visibly heightened. Officers moved with greater purpose, and armed guards stood at key junctions. They proceeded carefully, using their maintenance duties as cover, to move closer to Central Command. As they approached a final security checkpoint, Mads consulted the ship's chronometer. "Shift change in 3 minutes. When the guards rotate, we'll have our window." They positioned themselves at a nearby systems panel, pretending to conduct diagnostics, while watching the checkpoint from their peripheral vision. Right on schedule, the guards received a communication and began the handover process to their replacements. "Now," Mads whispered. They moved with practiced casualness, approaching the checkpoint with their credentials ready. The distracted guards, focused on their handover, performed only a cursory check before allowing them through. Beyond the checkpoint lay the Central Command anteroom, a circular chamber with multiple terminals, and a large blast door leading to the command center itself. A handful of technicians worked at various stations, but none paid particular attention to the arrival of logistics personnel. Mads led them to an auxiliary systems terminal, positioned in a partial alcove, providing some cover from casual observation. While Azora stood guard, He connected a disguised data spike to the terminal and began the process of uploading the virus. 6 minutes to complete the upload, he murmured. Azora watched the technicians alert for any sign of suspicion. We may not have 6 minutes. Look. Through the viewport, into the main command center, they could see increased activity. Officers were gathering around a tactical display, where a familiar nebula was being highlighted. They've found the resistance fleet, Azora realized with horror. They're preparing to attack. Mads worked faster, his fingers flying over the terminal interface. Virus at 20%. We need more time. An alarm suddenly blared throughout the ship. A voice announced, "All personnel to battle stations. Hostile fleet detected in Sector 7. This is not a drill." The anteroom erupted into activity as technicians rushed to their stations. In the confusion, no one noticed the two logistics officers at the auxiliary terminal until a security officer approached them directly. "You two," he barked. "All non-essential personnel are to report to designated safe areas immediately." Mads straightened, assuming a deferential posture. "Sir, we were instructed to complete system diagnostics on this terminal, regardless of alert status." Commander Draith's direct order. The mention of Draith caused the officer to hesitate. In that moment of uncertainty, Azora noticed a familiar figure entering the anteroom through the main command center door, Draith himself, accompanied by a tall hegemon with Admiral's insignia. Admiral Vor. "Incoming," she warned Mads softly. The security officer turned to see what had caught her attention, and Mads used the distraction to accelerate the virus upload, bypassing safety protocols. The terminal blinked a warning about potential system instability, which he ignored. "Virus at 60%, he whispered. "Need 2 more minutes." But they didn't have 2 minutes. Draith had spotted them and was approaching with purpose, Admiral Vor, following with narrowed eyes. "Those logistics officers," they heard Draith say. "Something about them seems familiar." "Abort," Azora decided. "We need to leave now." Mads checked the upload. 70%. Might be enough to cause some disruption. They disconnected the data spike and turned to leave only to find their path blocked by Draith and Vor. The commander's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on them scanning beyond their disguises. "You," he said, recognition dawning. "Impossible." Mads reacted instantly, drawing his concealed weapon and firing at the ceiling conduits. Steam burst from the damaged pipes, creating momentary chaos. In the confusion, they bolted for the exit, shoving past startled technicians. Alarms intensified as Draith shouted for security. They sprinted down the corridor, their cover irrevocably blown. "The virus?" Azora asked as they ran. "Partial upload," Mads replied. "Might disrupt systems temporarily, but not enough for a complete shutdown." They rounded a corner and encountered a squad of armed guards. There was no time for subtlety. Mads fired his weapon repeatedly, creating a gap they could charge through. Azora followed using her own concealed blaster, with deadly accuracy. "We need to reach the hangar," Mads shouted over the alarms. "If the Reliant is still there—" "It won't be," Azora cut him off. "They'll have locked down all vessels. We need another way off this ship." They battled through more security personnel, their progress slowing as resistance increased. The partial virus upload was having some effect. Lighting flickered, and automated security doors malfunctioned, but the ship's core systems remained operational. "Escape pods," Mads suggested, as they took momentary shelter in a service alcove. "Deck 12 port section." Azora shook her head. "They'll be monitored. Shot down before we get clear," she thought rapidly. "The fighter bay. If we can steal a hegemon interceptor—" "Worth a try," Mads agreed. 3 decks down." They moved again, using maintenance passages where possible to avoid the growing number of security teams. The ship had entered full battle readiness, with troops mobilizing throughout. Through viewport windows, they glimpsed the space beyond where hegemon warships were forming attack patterns. "The resistance fleet is emerging from the nebula," Azora observed. "They're engaging without our signal." "Admiral Korik must have realized the hegemon discovered them," Mads reasoned. "He's launching a preemptive strike." They reached the fighter bay access corridor, only to find it heavily guarded. Using the last of their diversion devices, a sonic disruptor, disguised as a maintenance tool, they created enough confusion to break through to the bay itself. Inside, pilots were rushing to their craft, preparing to launch against the resistance fleet. Mads and Azora used the activity as cover, moving along the periphery toward an interceptor that was still unattended. They had almost reached it, when a familiar voice stopped them cold. "I underestimated you once, Princess. Not again." They turned to find Commander Drath blocking their path, his cybernetic eye glowing with malevolent intensity. He had discarded his uniform jacket, revealing extensive, cybernetic enhancements across his torso and arms. "Your rescue of the princess was impressive, human," he said to Mads. "But it was ultimately futile. The Dominion will crush your pathetic resistance, and Aquilon will fall. This time, there will be no mercy for its people." "You'll have to go through us first," Mads replied, raising his weapon. Drath moved with cybernetically enhanced speed, closing the distance before Mads could fire. A mechanical arm knocked the weapon aside while another struck him with crushing force, sending him sprawling across the deck. Azora attacked without hesitation, her royal combat training evident in her precise strikes. She targeted the joints between Drath's organic and cybernetic components, the vulnerable integration points. Each successful hit caused him to falter momentarily, but his enhanced strength made him a formidable opponent. Mads recovered and rejoined the fight, the two of them coordinating their attacks with the synchronization that had developed during their brief but intense partnership. They gradually maneuvered Drath away from the interceptor, creating an opportunity for escape. But the hegemon commander was adaptive. His cybernetic systems analyzed their fighting patterns and adjusted. He landed a devastating blow to Azora's midsection that sent her crashing into a maintenance console. As Mads rushed to her defense, Drath caught him by the throat with a mechanical hand, lifting him off the ground. "Your resistance dies with you," Drath snarled, tightening his grip. Azora, despite her injuries, spotted an opportunity. The maintenance console she had struck was a fuel regulation system for the fighters. She fired her blaster at its exposed circuitry, causing a cascade of electrical failures. Fuel lines ruptured, spraying volatile material across the bay. Warning klaxons sounded as the automatic fire suppression systems activated. Drath turned toward the disturbance, his grip on Mads loosening just enough. Mads broke free, delivering a powerful kick to the commander's knee joint, where cybernetic met organic. Something snapped and Drath stumbled. The momentary advantage was all they needed. Together, Mads and Azora made a final push toward the interceptor, diving into its open cockpit as chaos engulfed the fighter bay. Mads took the pilot's position, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. The interceptor's engines ignited, lifting it from the deck as emergency personnel rushed to contain the spreading fuel fire. Drath, damaged, but mobile, fired at them with his integrated weapon system. Plasma bolts scorched the interceptor's hull as Mads maneuvered it toward the bay's magnetic field barrier. "Hang on!" he shouted, punching the throttle to maximum. They shot through the barrier into open space, immediately confronted by the massive battle unfolding around them. The resistance fleet had engaged the hegemon forces in a desperate gambit, fighters swarming between capital ships as energy weapons crisscrossed the void. "We're in a hegemon fighter," Azora realized. "Our own people will fire on us." Mads activated the communication system, broadcasting on Alliance frequencies. "Aurora, this is Rogue. We've commandeered a hegemon interceptor and are attempting to clear the engagement zone, requesting recognition protocols." There was no immediate response as they weaved through the battlefield, avoiding fire from both sides. Then Admiral Korik's voice cut through the static. "Rogue, transmit authentication sequence." Mads input the code they had been given before the mission. Tense seconds passed before the response came. "Authentication confirmed. All Alliance vessels be advised, hegemon interceptor designated on tactical displays is friendly. Repeat, do not engage." With that immediate threat neutralized, they assessed the battle situation. The virus had caused some disruption to the Dominion systems, but not the complete shutdown they had hoped for. The massive flagship was still operational, its weapon batteries firing with devastating effect against the smaller Alliance vessels. "We failed," Azora said, watching an Alliance cruiser break apart under concentrated fire. The virus wasn't fully uploaded. Mads studied the tactical situation, his pilot's instincts searching for an opportunity. "Maybe not, but we're not done yet." He opened a channel to the Aurora. "Admiral Korik, the Dominion's Central Command node is partially compromised. A concentrated attack on its port shield generator might create a vulnerability." "Understood, Rogue. Can you provide assistance?" Mads glanced at Azora, who nodded firmly. "Affirmative, Admiral. We're on it." They swung the interceptor around, using its hegemon identification to approach the Dominion without immediate challenge. The flagship's port side was less engaged in the battle, its attention focused on the main resistance fleet. "There," Azora pointed to a protrusion on the hull. "That's the shield generator housing." Mads guided the interceptor closer, using debris from damaged ships as cover. "Our weapons won't make a dent in that alone. We need to coordinate with Alliance forces." They transmitted targeting coordinates to the Aurora, which redirected a squadron of bombers to their position. As they approached, however, the Dominion's defensive systems identified their interceptor as a potential threat. Point defense cannons tracked them, forcing Mads into evasive maneuvers. "They've made us. We need to keep their attention until the bombers arrive." What followed was a display of piloting virtuosity as Mads pushed the stolen interceptor to its limits, dancing through lethal energy barrages while remaining close enough to the shield generator to draw defensive fire away from the approaching Alliance squadron. Azora monitored systems and called out threats, the two of them functioning as a perfect team despite the unfamiliar craft. When a direct hit compromised their starboard stabilizer, she rerouted power to maintain control without being asked. The Alliance bombers arrived, launching their payloads at the now exposed shield generator. Multiple explosions blossomed against the Dominion's hull, and for a moment, it seemed their gambit had failed. Then, a secondary explosion tore through the generator housing, creating a cascade of failures across the flagship's port defense grid. Shield breach confirmed," Azora announced, reading the interceptor's tactical display. "They've lost 30% coverage on the port side." Admiral Korik's voice came through the comm. "All vessels concentrate fire on the breach. This is our only chance." The resistance fleet responded, capital ships maneuvering to bring their main weapons to bear on the Dominion's vulnerability. Mads guided their interceptor clear of the impending barrage, rejoining the Alliance fighter screen as a massive coordinated attack struck the flagship. Without full shields, the Dominion's armor buckled under the assault. Internal explosions were visible through the breach, spreading as critical systems failed. The mighty vessel listed to port its weapon fire, becoming sporadic and uncoordinated. On the primary command channel, a new voice spoke, Admiral Vor himself, his tone one of disbelief and rage. "This is impossible. The Dominion cannot fall to these rebels." Admiral Korik responded, his voice steady. "This is Admiral Korik of the Alliance Resistance. Your flagship is crippled, Admiral Vor. Surrender your forces, or we will be forced to destroy you completely." A tense silence followed, broken by the sounds of continued battle as hegemon vessels fought on. Then, remarkably, Admiral Vor's voice returned. "The Dominion surrenders. All hegemon vessels stand down. I repeat, stand down." Across the battlefield, hegemon ships gradually ceased fire. The resistance had achieved what many thought impossible. They had defeated the pride of the hegemon fleet and captured its commanding admiral. Mads guided their damaged interceptor toward the Aurora, where a landing bay opened to receive them. As they settled onto the deck, exhaustion finally caught up with them. Mads slumped in the pilot's seat, adrenaline fading to leave pain in its wake. Azora reached over to touch his face gently. "We did it," she said simply. He turned to look at her, a smile breaking through his fatigue. "We did. Your people are safe. Aquilon is free." Medical teams rushed to the interceptor as they emerged treating their injuries, while senior officers debriefed them on the battle's outcome. The news was better than they could have hoped. With Admiral Vor captured and the Dominion disabled, the hegemon occupation forces at Aquilon had lost their command structure. Many were surrendering without further resistance. In the days that followed, the Alliance Resistance Fleet, now openly calling itself the New Galactic Alliance, secured the Aquilon system and began liberating other worlds under hegemon control. The empire that had seemed invincible was fracturing its subject planets, rising in rebellion as news of the Dominion's fall spread. 1 week after the battle, Princess Azora stood on the observation deck of the Aurora, watching as they approached her homeworld. Aquilon's vast oceans gleamed in the light of its sun, the floating cities that housed its population visible as jewel-like clusters on the azure surface. Mads joined her, his injuries healed, but new scars added to his collection. He stood beside her in comfortable silence, sharing the moment of homecoming. "What happens now, Princess?" he finally asked. Azora turned to him. "Reconstruction, healing, building a stronger alliance that won't fracture when challenged." She hesitated. "I'll need advisors I can trust. People who understand both diplomacy and less conventional approaches." "Are you offering me a job again?" Mads asked with a hint of his familiar grin. "I'm offering you a place by my side," she replied seriously. "If you want it." Mads took her hand, his expression unusually solemn. "I can think of nowhere I'd rather be. But I'm not exactly royal consort material. I'm just a pilot who's good at impossible missions." "Then perhaps that's the next impossible mission," Azora suggested, her eyes bright with something more than royal determination. "Learning to be whatever we need to be for each other and for the Alliance." As Aquilon grew larger in the viewport, Mads pulled her closer. "I accept the mission, Your Highness." Azora smiled, her royal reserve finally giving way to the joy of homecoming and the promise of a future with the reckless human who had changed everything. "Then, let's go home, Rogue. We have an alliance to build." The Aurora descended toward Aquilon's capital city, where crowds had gathered to welcome their princess home. A new chapter was beginning, not just for Azora and Mads, but for the galaxy itself. The Hegemon Empire's grip had been broken, and in its place, something stronger and more just would rise. Freedom had prevailed, carried on the shoulders of an unlikely partnership between a princess with unbreakable will and the rogue who had risked everything to save her. As they prepared to disembark, Mads took Azora's hand, one last time in the privacy of the ship. "For the record," he said softly, "I would have come for you even without the mission. Some things are worth any risk." Azora's bioluminescent patterns brightened with emotion as she squeezed his hand. "And some people are worth waiting for even through 7 days of torture." Together, they stepped forward to face the future they had fought so hard to secure, a future of Freedom Alliance and the bond between two warriors from different worlds who had found in each other something worth fighting for.